issue is something that I've covered. So without further ado, we're just going to go ahead and get started. Is that fair? All right. All right. So today's topic basically is Alzheimer's versus dementia and what's the difference. I often hear people come to me talking to family members and they'll say something, well, my loved one doesn't have that. They just got a little dementia, or they just a little forgetful, or they don't have Alzheimer's. They have dementia. So I want to clear this up for everyone to really just explain to people what is Alzheimer's, what is dementia, what's the difference, and why should we care about this on a larger scale. If you've never heard of the Senior Source, we are a nonprofit organization that's been serving the Dallas community for 64 years. And our whole mission is to improve the quality of life for older adults here in Dallas. Most of our programs are focused on Dallas County only. However, through my department, Caregiver Support, we serve Dallas as well as Collin counties, both. Because there are lots of caregivers out there. And one thing I like to tell people, when it comes to supporting caregivers, most of the time, many people kind of find themselves in this role, and it wasn't something that they prepared to be, right? Something happens to a loved one, we may think we're going to come in for a few minutes or a little while, make a couple of meals, direct them to a few doctor's appointments, maybe help them out around the house for a little while, and it turns into something much more involved than that. So our department exists simply to support the person who is the family caregiver, connect to community resources, find the things they need, but also to provide that emotional support that's needed to a caregiver. Just by show of hands, how many people in here are caregivers or have been caregivers? Right, look around. It's quite a few of us here, and it touches everyone. So my department exists to help a caregiver, especially if they're brand new to this role, or maybe they are focused on a particular problem and they don't know exactly where to go or what to do. We exist to help you with answering those questions. If you're brand new to caregiving, we do something called a care consultation, and that helps you figure out what you need to do first, second, and third, right? You walk away with a care plan, a plan of action, feeling really good about these are the clear things that I need to do right now for my loved one. If it's something that you've been struggling with or you don't know exactly where to go, we're here to help with that as well, to just give you some guidance and answer questions so that your loved one ultimately gets what they need. So that's primarily what I do through caregiver support. I'll go into more details a little later, but I just wanted to give you an idea about our department and the focus for caregivers. So on today's agenda, these are the things that we're going to talk about. We're going to talk about the prevalence of Alzheimer's in our community, defining Alzheimer's and dementia, what's the difference, recognizing the warning signs of Alzheimer's, how is Alzheimer's diagnosed, treatment options, taking action practical steps to maintain a healthy brain, and then an overview of services offered by the Caregiver Support Program at the Senior Source. All right, so is that fair? Any questions thus far? All right. So why should we care about Alzheimer's? The reality is we should care because this is really at a place of being an epidemic. Every 68 seconds, someone new in the United States develops Alzheimer's disease, and by 2050, we're estimating that will be every 33 seconds someone will develop Alzheimer's disease. People right now, we have about 6 million Americans currently living with this disease, and 1 in 3 Americans know someone who has Alzheimer's. Just those stats alone, if you really think about that, every 68 seconds. So since I've been talking, it's been at least 10 people that's been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease at this point. When you just thinking about the sheer numbers of that, by the time we're through today, that's why we need to be concerned about this, because it's impacting all of us, whether we are the person that is being diagnosed or we are the person who's now becoming the caregiver for someone who's been diagnosed with this disease. This is why we should care. You know, you hear a lot of things out there. I know a while ago, one of the things that they were saying the cause of Alzheimer's was potentially aluminum or certain deodorants or different chemicals. The number one risk factor of Alzheimer's that we know of today for certain is age. The longer you live, the greater your chances are of getting this disease. And what are we doing more now than ever before? We're living. We're living longer and longer than ever before. When you turn 65, you have a 1 in 9 chance of developing Alzheimer's disease. And when you turn 85, you have a 50% chance of developing Alzheimer's disease. Also, there's a thing about family history, right? We hear a little bit about that. When we talk about family history, we're looking at immediate family members. It has to be a parent or a sibling. We're not necessarily looking at grandparents, aunts, uncles, cousins when we talk about family predisposition. But even with that, by 2050, they're estimating that between 13.8 and 16 million people will be diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. So when you think about it from a healthcare standpoint, when you think about the sheer volume of people, you see how that can stress our healthcare system in some way or another because of all the people that will be needing treatment and services surrounding Alzheimer's disease. When it comes to the African American community and the Hispanic community, we also deal with Alzheimer's from a disproportional rate because of other health conditions we also deal with, such as diabetes and heart disease. These chronic conditions can also exacerbate us getting Alzheimer's disease because when you know someone who's dealing with high blood pressure, maybe they've had strokes or many strokes or TIAs, that is what can sometimes cause a person to develop vascular dementia, that scar tissue that forms on those nerve cells. Also, when you think about diabetes, your blood sugar being too low or too high can also have an impact on the brain. I don't know if you've ever been around someone that has diabetes. My mother has type 2, and I can always tell when she hasn't eaten because she gets into what we call a demented state. She's extremely confused, she's agitated, she can't make a decision, and she can't remember a lot of things. And it's not that she has Alzheimer's, but it's because she has diabetes and her blood sugar has dropped too low, right? So those are illnesses that are high in our communities that have an impact on us developing Alzheimer's later in life. And so we want to make sure that when we're taking care of ourselves, that we are going and getting tested and we're taking our medications and we're doing all the things that we need to do to maintain our good blood sugar numbers and also when it comes to our blood pressure because it can definitely have an impact. Also, when it comes to women, 2/3 of American women develop Alzheimer's, and that's just simple because we live longer than men, and if the number one risk factor is age, and the longer you live, the greater your chances. You have more women developing Alzheimer's because we're outliving men. That's just all that comes down to. When you turn 45, you have a 1 in 5 chance for women and a 1 in 10 for men. And I know we say 45, that's a low number, but you do not have to be older to have Alzheimer's. It can really happen to you at any age, and we're going to talk about that a little bit later in life. We're going to talk about that a little bit later. But when it comes to women, just know it comes back to also that age, the fact that we're living a lot longer. Now, what is dementia? All right. Dementia, think about it like this. It is a general term. If I said to you right now that someone in my family, I told you they had cancer, you would immediately come back to me and say, well, what type of cancer do they have? Well, the same is true for dementia. Dementia is just an umbrella. It is a general term. There are many types of dementia that exist. All of the different types of dementia that exist have these symptoms in common. There's going to be a decline in thinking skills, memory loss, problems with reasoning and judgment, disorientation, difficulty in learning. There's going to be a loss of language skills, decline in the ability to perform routine tasks, right? Now, depending on the type of dementia, you may see more deficits in some of these areas than in others, but they're all going to have an element of these symptoms in common, right? These are all the different types of dementia that exist. You have Alzheimer's disease, you have brain injury, Parkinson's disease, you have drug interaction, you have something called Creutzfeldt-Jakob's disease, you know it commonly as mad cow. There's Huntington's disease, multi-infrared dementia, depression, thyroid problems, Lewy body disease, Pick's disease, frontal temporal dementia, and normal pressure hydrocephalus, commonly known as water on the brain. These are all the different types of dementia that exist. So when you hear someone saying, my loved one has a dementia, then you want to ask, or we want to get better in the habit of saying, well, what type of dementia do they have? Sometimes we leave the doctor's office and we don't know what type of dementia. They may say, well, you have dementia. We want to ask them, well, can you tell me exactly what type of dementia I'm looking at, or I'm dealing with, or you're diagnosing me with? Because the type of dementia is important. It's important when it comes to how you may communicate with someone as the disease progresses, how you interact with them, the types of medications that they may need, right? So we want to know exactly what type of dementia we're dealing with. Now, we hear about Alzheimer's type of dementia the most because it's the most prevalent form of dementia that's out here. 60 to 80% of people who have a form of dementia have Alzheimer's disease. The next most prevalent is vascular dementia. That's where you heard me a few minutes ago talking about a person who's had a lot of strokes, little mini TIAs. Sometimes it can form a scar tissue, and that is what's destroying those nerve cells. 10 to 40% of people have vascular dementia. The next most prevalent form of this is Lewy body dementia. Lewy body is when dementia is attacking the frontal temporal lobe a lot sooner than maybe with some of the other forms of dementia. The person has less impulse control. That filter that kind of keeps us socially appropriate, that keeps us from saying and doing the things that we have been taught not to say and do, lives in our frontal temporal region of our brain. So if that's the area that's being attacked, that person oftentimes can be very inappropriate socially. They may say whatever, they may be doing whatever, disrobing, all kinds of things. They could be sexually inappropriate, making statements that they wouldn't have made before. That could be an indicator that the person has Lewy body dementia, okay? Now, another thing that I want to talk about is, typically there's a term that you hear. You don't hear it as often, but you hear it sometimes, and that is mild cognitive impairment, or also known as MCI. Mild cognitive impairment is another thing. It is memory loss that is severe enough that we notice, right? We notice that you're not retaining information or you can't recall information, but it's not severe enough to a point that I can categorize it yet, right? Some people develop MCI and it never turns into any type of dementia. They could develop MCI from a car accident, okay? Well, maybe it was the accident, the impact was so great, they were injured, and now they're having some cognitive delays or cognitive problems because of the accident, right? So they may not be able to retain information as much anymore, recall information. They could have some things going on, but it's not severe enough at this point where we would classify it as a type of dementia. Now, mild cognitive impairment doesn't necessarily lead to a type of dementia, but everyone who has dementia at some point had mild cognitive impairment, right? The thing about it is most people are not diagnosed in the early stages of dementia. Most people are not diagnosed until the moderate stage of dementia. And that's when your memory deficit or your cognitive abilities have declined to the point where they are very noticeable, right? So some of the things that could be happening, that person, all of a sudden, they're starting to forget how to go drive places. Maybe they got lost on their way to church or on their way home from church. Maybe they aren't recalling names of people that they know. It could be family members. It could be really good friends. Maybe they're starting to have difficulties at work during their job functions. Those are some of the types of things that start to show up into the place where they are very noticeable. One of the biggest things that happens is they start a fire or they have a car accident, right? The car accident could be that they ran into the garage door at home or they hit the mailbox or they keep running up on the curb. But they keep having these small fender benders, and eventually they have an accident to the point where the police are called out, and then they may call their in case of emergency person, which could be you, a child, a good friend, their spouse, and they call you and say, hey, your loved one's had an accident, they're okay, but they're just a little shaken up, and we feel like it's best if you come and pick them up and don't allow them to drive home. They seem to be a little rattled and confused. That's most of the time when the family has their first big indicator that there is something going on with their loved one. Another big indicator could be that all of a sudden there's a drastic change in their mood and personality, right? Maybe they were someone who were very pleasant, very sociable. Everyone loved being around them. Now they're socially withdrawing. They can be even mean, some of their responses, and they just seem angry all the time or negative. And instead of leaning into that person, we pull away because what do we say? Hey, life's enough. I don't want to deal with all of that. And so we stop calling the person, but that could be an indicator that there's something more going on with them. The whole point I'm making is that most of the time, dementia is not diagnosed when it's in its very early forms or early stages. We normally miss that window. We normally don't get diagnosed until that person's in moderate dementia. Are there any questions thus far? Yes. Okay. So the question is asked, is there a cure for dementia, and is there something you can take when you first find that it's going on? So I hadn't made it to that point, but I'll answer the question. There is no cure for dementia. And the medications that are on the market, they treat the symptoms. Some of the symptoms can be the sundowning and different things that they experience, but it's nothing that's going to stop the progression of the disease at all. So, but we'll dive into that in a little later into the presentation. Any other questions? All right. So exactly what is Alzheimer's disease? Alzheimer's is a progressive brain disorder that gradually destroys brain cells and affects a person's memory, their ability to learn, to make judgments, communicate, and carry out basic daily activities. The biggest thing I want you to know is Alzheimer's is not a normal part of aging. It is not something we should just expect to happen just because we're getting older. Prime example, I have two grandmothers. My dad's mother lived to be 95. She had diabetes. She actually was a double amputee, and she was still baking 7-Up pound cakes and frying chicken, and if you did not eat at her house, you were in trouble. You had to eat if you stopped by, right? My mom's mother is 95 now, and she has Alzheimer's. My dad's mother did not have Alzheimer's. In fact, I called her CNN. She never left the porch, but she could tell you everything that was going on in the neighborhood, everything, and she left nothing out, So even at 95, it's not something that is just going to happen, or we should just kind of shrug our shoulders and say, hey, well, they're getting older, it just happens, I tell people, plan to be the other one, right? Because at 85, you have a 50% chance. I'm not planning to be the one with it. I'm planning to be the one without it, right? So let's look at it from that standpoint. One of the most heartbreaking things that I do have to tell family members often is that this is a fatal disease that has no cure. That their loved one may seem okay right now. Oftentimes, I get those phone calls where the people are saying, there is nothing wrong with my mother. She's just gaming me. She just wants attention. I done told her I can't keep coming over here all the time, and she wants me to come over. And I have to tell them, ma'am, your mother she's not playing. She's not gaming you. There are literally times where she can respond to you or respond to you appropriately, and 3 minutes later, you could ask her that same question and she's not responding appropriately or in the same way. That's literally the difference between sometimes those signals get to where they need to be, fine, and in the next 2 minutes, they may not get there in the same way. So this disease is progressive. A person starts off and you may not even notice very slight differences in their personality or their ability to do things. But just know as time goes on, they're going to lose ground. They're going to lose the ability to do more and more things. And that's why they require to have someone, if they're in their home, to even eventually move in with them and require 24-hour care, because they lose the ability to eventually chew, swallow, and breathe. And without those things, those are the life-sustaining methods that we all must do in order to function, okay? So that's how this disease ends up being fatal. And unfortunately, we still don't have a cure. Yes, ma'am. Hereditary to the point where we would look at immediate family members. mother's siblings, not necessarily a genetic link considering grandparents, aunts, cousins. Now, can you look at a family? Is there a family out there that you could pull up a case study and every generation or most of the people in the generations developed Alzheimer's? Yes, there is. But they still don't, that's not the norm. That's not the norm. You may see it where some people in this generation have it, and it skips a generation, and then the next generation may have it. Yeah. No, you're fine. You are setting me up for the very next slide. No, that is great. Not a problem. But there are two basically ways we talk about Alzheimer's. There's late onset Alzheimer's and then there's early onset. Late onset Alzheimer's is kind of more common. A person is diagnosed in their 60s, 70s, and 80s. You hear about that the most, right? Most of the people that you know that was diagnosed with a type of dementia, especially Alzheimer's, they are older when it happens. However, I said earlier, you do not have to be older to develop Alzheimer's disease. It can happen in your 30s, your 40s, and your 50s. I just had a case right before I went out on vacation. It was the end of August. A young lady I spoke to, she's a long distance caregiver. She lives in Chicago. She's 26 years old. Her mother's 48. And her mother's parents, her grandparents, are taking care of her mom. She moved back in with them because she requires care because she has early onset Alzheimer's disease. People who are actually diagnosed in their early ages, they actually pass away a lot sooner than when a person is diagnosed with it in the late onset, in the later stages of life. We have no idea or reason as to why that happens, but it does definitely happen. And just to remember, you do not have to be older to develop Alzheimer's. And we're seeing a rise in people in their 40s, early 40s, developing Alzheimer's disease. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am. I mean, it's hard to say. Vascular dementia is a type of dementia, and vascular dementia is more so associated with someone having a stroke. But it is possible to have more than one type of dementia. It's possible for a person to have vascular dementia and Alzheimer's, or Parkinson's disease and Alzheimer's. You can have more than one type of dementia. So, the onset of it could have very well been the fact that she had a stroke. And now, because of the stroke and that to the brain, the area of the brain that was impacted, and the destruction of that scar tissue that's destroying those brain cells at this point. All right. Yes, sir.
We're now looking at areas of mental stability, or let's say mental instability.
Mm-hmm.
And when they are looking at a person, are they saying, okay, the protocol is, let's see, this person has Alzheimer's or dementia, or are there other keys?
Mm-hmm.
So this guy just had a mental problem, bipolar, whatever. So is there a distinction?
Yeah. And that's a great question. So the question that he's asking is there a distinction between someone having mental health disorder and someone having Alzheimer's, and how can they tell the difference, whether it's a mental health problem or if it's Alzheimer's disease? Most of the time, if someone has a mental health problem, it is diagnosed, or you see signs of that early or throughout their life. It's not something that is gonna happen to them later in life. Most onsets for mental health disorders is 21 years and younger, 21 years of age and younger. Most mental health diseases. If the person hasn't displayed anything prior to being 21 years of age or older, right? So think about someone who's dealing with depression or bipolar disorder or schizophrenia. That is something they have probably dealt with throughout their life. So when it comes to them getting older, that is why it's so important that we go to the doctor on a regular basis so that your doctor can have an established baseline of your overall health, right? Because now if we start to see some things that are different, now I can say, hey, well, let's run some tests on some other things. This doesn't have anything to do with this person being bipolar or schizophrenic or anything of that magnitude. This is the onset of something else. You also have different doctors called neuropsychologists that are brought in for just that, to be able to help you distinguish whether or not it's a mental health thing or if it's Alzheimer's or if it's both. All right. You're welcome. I saw another hand, sir.
Yes, if I was able to hear the news just asking about from like even the PTSD, I saw some of the same things, fresh memory loss and stuff.
Hmm.
All of those same things related to PTSD.
Yes. I mean, you have to think about it when it comes to like mental health disorders and PTSD and things of that nature. Um, when you've gone through a traumatic experience, just the trauma of that in memory, and sometimes our brains will shut down to protect us, right, from whatever is going on. And so you will see some of these things, some similarities, but there are some distinct differences in the thing that a person with dementia doesn't have the ability to learn how to do something again, right? Once they lose that ability, there is no way to teach them how to walk again or chew again, or you can't teach them people's names and expect them to remember, right? Because the first thing that's impacted with when it comes to the top forms of dementia, or Alzheimer's rather, is that the short-term memory, right? They can remember things that happened 20, 30, 40 years ago with ease, but they can't tell you what happened 5 minutes ago. And that's because that short-term memory is impacted. So if I lose the ability to know how to do something and you want to show me or teach me, I don't have the ability to retain what you just showed me. So that's also a distinct difference between someone having Alzheimer's disease and someone having a mental health disorder. Because a person with a mental health disorder can learn, can be taught, can retain, and this person doesn't have the ability to. Another thing I want to just touch on, and I hope I don't confuse it when I say this, but at one point, many, many moons ago, Alzheimer's or dementia was looked upon as a mental health disorder. It is not today. They know that it is a medical condition. But at one point, and I know you all know this term, is that they used to call it senile dementia, or you have somebody saying that person's senile. I can think back to when I was growing up, there was always that one person in the neighborhood that we all had these great stories about, but chances are that person was living at home alone, and they probably had dementia of some sort. The person on my street, she was a really mean older lady, and she was throwing rocks at the mailman, and she was doing all kinds of stuff, and you knew not to go in her yard and all those things. But looking back on it and what I know today, that she indeed had dementia, and that's what was happening, right? And so at one point, we did look upon this as being a mental health disorder, but we now know differently that it is definitely more biological and chemical that's happening to you than it is a mental health disorder. All right. I'm going to skip past this because this video isn't playing, but I'm going to just talk you through what the video was going to say anyways. And so, exactly what's happening in our brain, how Alzheimer's disease impacts the brain is basically like this. There are two things you need to know about. There's something called amyloid plaques, and that's a clump of protein fragments that live outside of the brain cell in our brain matter that's destroying that nerve cell from the outside. And then there's tangles. That's another twisted strand of protein that's destroying that neuron or their brain cells from the inside, right? So that nerve cell is being attacked from the outside and the inside. And those nerve cells or those neurons are what we need, our body needs in order to function. So think about it like this. Those neurons or brain cells, I like to look at them, they're like these perfect little tree trunks, and they have their branches spreading over. And you see those little light signals or pulses? That's literally your brain sending the signal for you to move, to shake your head, to speak, to cough, to laugh, whatever. We don't even think about our brains not being able to do this for us. And it happens at lightning speed, right? I say really beyond lightning speed. It's really miraculous at how the brain works when you really think about it. Now, that amyloid plaque and tangles are destroying these neurons that are responsible for carrying that signal. So if that neuron is being destroyed, how does that signal get through? It can't. It literally cannot get through. And even sometimes, despite the destruction that's taking place, your loved one literally has good moments and bad moments. Remember earlier when I was saying, you may ask a question or have a conversation, and they're in that conversation with you. They are calling people by their right name. They're doing all the things. And 10 minutes later, it's a completely different person, a completely different conversation. In spite of that destruction that's happening, those signals somehow were able to get through 10 minutes ago. And 10 minutes later, because of the destruction, those signals were not able to get through, right? This is another picture. All right, this is a picture, of course, upon autopsy. This is upon autopsy, upon death with autopsy. That is the 100% way that they knew that you had Alzheimer's disease, right? I like to say that your brain looks like that perfect piece of cauliflower cut down the center, right? So on one side of the screen, you have the brain of an older person that's a healthy brain. And then on the other side of the screen, you have the brain of a person who had Alzheimer's disease. You see the type of damage that has taken place over time. There are literally sections of this brain that are missing, that have eroded away. The brain has literally shrunken and changed shape. This is how a person with Alzheimer's brain is being impacted. So when you think about the things they still have the ability to do, it is truly amazing. It is amazing that they can function in the ways that they can still function, all right? Mm-hmm. Yeah. It's definitely the destruction. It's the destruction of those amyloid plaques and tangles. Yep. All right. So these are the warning signs. Now, I got a little cheat sheet up here. I'm going to keep it honest because I can't remember all of this. But before I go through the warning signs, everyone in here has to repeat after me. You ready? All right. I will not self-diagnose myself as I'm going through this list. There is a such thing as normal age-related forgetfulness. But that does not mean I have dementia. All right. Now, I'm going to hold y'all to that as I go through this. All right? I'm just saying, right? So, as I was saying, these are the 10 warning signs of Alzheimer's disease, right? And so, as I'm talking about these things, sometimes they're going to seem very common, or you're going to be like, I just did that before I came here, right? I tell everyone, if it is not your strong suit, do not use that as your measuring stick, all right? For me, I am constantly losing things. If my keys are not in plain sight, I'm going to be late wherever I'm going. So I'm not going to use that as my measuring stick, all right? But I love clothing. I love fashion. I'm going to be sharp to take the trash out, okay? I don't sit around in the house just with anything on. So if you see me and I'm disheveled, that is something you worry about, okay? Because that's outside of my norm, all right? So when I'm going through these warning signs, look at it from that perspective, okay? Because, you know, some of us got in the line with God and we got extra helpings of certain gifts, and other of us did not. We got out of that line, right? So if that's not our lane, then that's not our measuring stick, all right? So here we go. Let's talk about it. All right, so the first warning sign is memory loss that disrupts daily life, right? So something that's age-related forgetfulness in that is going to be sometimes forgetting names or appointments, but we're remembering them later, right? Now, we all do that. Sometimes we're busy, we're stressed, we make an appointment, we sign up for something, the day comes, we forget about it. 2 weeks later, we think, I was supposed to go somewhere, and we realize it was 2 weeks ago, right? That's normal age-related forgetfulness. Now, when it's going to cross over into something that we're going to be more concerned about, when you start to forget the names of children, family members, spouses, people you see all the time, Standing appointments, if you every week you have a standing appointment to go somewhere and you've been doing that for 20 years, and then all of a sudden you're missing that appointment. You're forgetting that you, every Monday at 10 o'clock, you have to be this particular place, and you were on time like clockwork. That is something we would take a closer look at, okay? Warning sign number 2, changes in planning or solving problems. So normal age-related forgetfulness with that would be making occasional errors when managing finances and household bills, all right? Now, it happens sometimes. I know for myself, when I turned 45, I had to get eyeglasses. I never worn eyeglasses before in my life, but I was transposing numbers like nobody's business, right? I thought it was a 6 and it was a 3. You know, just all these things, right? So that's normal age-related forgetfulness. But something we would take a closer look at would be, say for instance, you know, you are that person that every first of the month you sit down, you have all of your bills and all of your responsibilities, you got the cup of coffee, and you're doing your thing, managing your budget, making sure everything lines up. And now all of a sudden you're having difficulty with that. None of these things are making sense. You're having a hard time logging into your accounts to pay these bills. And it's not because you have forgotten your password, but it's because you're what you need to do, the steps aren't making sense to you. That is something we would take a closer look at, all right? Difficulty completing familiar tasks. Age-related changes with that would be occasionally needing help to use the microwave settings or to record a TV show, right? So I'm gonna tell you, there's no shame in asking grandkids to help you with your iPhone or things of that nature. I need help with my iPhone. I have a 10-year-old great niece that can work an iPhone like nobody's business. It does things I had no idea it could do until she had my phone one day. So that's normal, right? But when we want to look at something more differently, or looking at it a little differently, the microwave in your house that you've used all the time, and now you're having problems operating a piece of equipment that's been there. Not the fact that it's a piece of new equipment, but something that you've had for quite some time. We would take a closer look at that, all right? Confusion with time or place. This is one of my favorite ones, because I like to say when someone retires, every day is Friday, right? You don't even think about it anymore. You're not committed to your calendar like I'm committed to mine, right? So it happens sometimes when you retire. You don't think about the days of the week the same way. You're not as aware of time, right? But something we're going to take a closer look at is if that person is not aware of the difference between what typically happens on a Sunday versus a Tuesday versus a Friday, right? If they're not orientated to date, time, and place, you know, and that could be the difference. Sometimes people start operating in reverse, meaning they're up all night as if it's 2 p.m., and at 2 p.m. they're asleep as if it's 2 a.m. And sometimes that our internal clock can get turned around, right? Those are things we're going to take a closer look at, all right? Trouble understanding images and spatial relationships. So typical age-related changes with that is just any changes with your vision. Sometimes as we age, our eyes age. I gave you an example of me having glasses. Sometimes we're diagnosed with having cataracts. Sometimes it's macular degeneration. Those are sometimes age-related changes that happen with our eyesight that's going to impact our ability to see images and spatial relationships. Something that we're going to take a closer look at when in this area is that all of a sudden that person starts having problems being afraid to get out of the bed, because now the bed seems higher off the ground than what it used to be, and they're worried about falling. Or this person stops bathing because they fear the bathtub, right? The bathtub looks like it's a deeper pool of water. And I don't know if any of you guys have ever had this experience, but if you have a loved one that has Alzheimer's and they need assistance with bathing and they fight you when they get into the bathroom, it's because to them it looks like you're trying to drown them. You're trying to get them to get into this bottomless pit of water, and maybe I can't swim. So if I feel like you're trying to force me into something that I don't want to do and I'm afraid, I am going to fight, right? It's that fight, flight, or freeze. And if I'm fighting for my life, guess what? Them taps are not going to be like, stop. They're going to be punching, kicking, hitting, all of the things because they feel like you're trying to harm them, and all you're simply trying to do is to get them to get a bath, right? So that may be the reason why all of a sudden you see the difference in your loved one's appearance and their hygiene is starting to fail, and it's because they're now fearing the bathroom. The tub looks a lot deeper than what it used to, different types of things, okay? Another one would be new problems with words and speaking and in writing. So typical age-related changes with that is we all have moments where we'll say, it's on the tip of my tongue. You know that word. We were there. We were at that restaurant. It was last week. The food was great. Where were we at? I'm trying to tell someone. We just cannot recall that word. There's typical age-related changes with that, right? Something that we're going to take more focus on would be literally if the person, and we have people around us all the time, where they stop using people's names and everyone is honey, baby, sugar, sweetie, and they never call someone's name, right? Sometimes we use terms of endearment, and that's fine, but am I using a term of endearment because I don't know your name anymore, right? So it's easier for me to call you sweetie or honey than to say Kimberly, David, John, right? So sometimes we have to be mindful of that. Are they doing this because they don't know the names? Before my grandmother, my mom's mom, was diagnosed, she used to say all the time, like, I hadn't talked to Kim. Tell Kim to give me a call, and I would call her, and the conversations were 30 seconds long. And I'd be like, hey, Grandma. She'd be like, hey, baby, how you doing? I'm fine. How you doing? She's like, I'm doing good. It's so good to hear from you. How's everybody doing out in Texas? They're fine. Grandmama love you. Okay, bye. That was the conversation. And that was all that she could manage at that point. But she was masking that there was something more going on, right? If I had kept her on that phone probably another 15 seconds, she'd have repeated all that she had said over to me again, right? So we want to be mindful of that when people are just using terms of endearment, or you get on the phone with someone and they are completely controlling the conversation and they say all the stuff they want to say, and then the conversation over with and they get off the phone. There could be something more going on with that person, right? And so those are the types of things we want to take a closer look at, right? Now, number 7, remember I told y'all this is not my measuring stick. Misplacing things and losing the ability to retrace steps. I am always losing things. I don't even worry about it at this point, right? But I got questions for you all. So how many of you have been watching your television show, maybe it's your favorite program, commercial comes on, and you think, let me run and go get a snack. And you go to the kitchen, and you get there, and you can't remember why you're in the kitchen. Just by laughter, I know I'm not the only person that's done this before, right? So if you're stubborn like I am, and I'm stubborn, I will stand there and I will say, I was doing this came on, and Sometimes it pops in, sometimes it does not, right? So I'll stand there a few more minutes, and then I may give up, and then I'll start to walk back to where I came from. And the moment my foot hits the floor in the room I was originally in, I went to go get something to drink. And I'll run back real quick to pour it up and come back before my show comes back on. If you do that, be honest, if you do that, raise your hand, let me see. See? You amongst good company. You don't have dementia. You don't have dementia if you do that. You thought I was getting ready to tell you some bad news. But the reason you don't have dementia is because you had the ability to retrace your steps, right? Whether you stood there and you mentally retraced them or you physically retraced them, you had the ability to retrace those steps, right? So a person with Alzheimer's, they do not have the ability to retrace steps. If you've ever been to their house, that's why the house is in disarray. It is literally because when they were watching TV and that thought came in, they would have went to the kitchen. If they didn't remember that they went in there for something to drink, guess what happens? I'm in the kitchen, I come up with something to do in the kitchen now, whether it's to clean out the cabinets, cook a 7-course meal, bake a cake, and I'm going to do that until a thought takes me somewhere else in the house. When the thought takes me somewhere else in the house, maybe I decided to, rearrange the cabinets, and I needed to go get something, a towel to wipe off or a cleaning supply. I go into that other room, I forget all about what I was doing in the kitchen. Now I'm in another room to do something else. And it's so on and so forth. You can literally see the path that they take around the house with different things, because there's not the recall to come back and put up the stuff that was in the kitchen. They're on to something else. That's how a lot of the fires get started. They were in the kitchen cooking, went to the bedroom to get something. Maybe it was their cell phone, forgot about it, sat on the bed, laid down, went to sleep. Or they missing an ingredient in something they wanted to cook, forgot all about cutting off the pot on the stove. They go to the grocery store. 2 hours later, fire has broken out in the home. They could be clear across town. Maybe they decided to stop to go see their daughter since they was out. When they got in the car, anything, they forgot all about the fact that they were cooking, right? So that's how those types of things happen, in a nutshell. Then there's decreased or poor judgment. That is basically when sometimes as we get older, no one's exempt from making a mistake. We all make mistakes, and it's A-okay. But when we're going to look at it a little bit closer, when you make mistakes, if those mistakes are compromising your safety in some way, right? If you're starting to give out very personal and important information to someone over the phone, or you're responding to personal and giving someone by text information about you and you don't know who they are for real, right? If you're starting to let people into the home, maybe someone is in the neighborhood and they're trying to sell you something or do something to the roof, and you open the door and you allow this stranger to come into the home. Those are things that compromise your safety, and we would consider it a decreased or poor judgment, right? And we're going to start to take a closer look at that because that's out of the norm. Now, number 9, withdrawal from work or social activities. We need to change the color of that one. I couldn't see it. I had to look down. Withdrawal from work or social activities. So, I mean, normal changes in that would be sometimes we're tired. We just don't want to go. 2 weeks ago it was a good idea. Today I don't want to go, so I'm not going, right? That happens sometimes. But what we would take a closer look at is if your strong suit is you are a social butterfly, there is not a party or gathering that you're not going to make. And then all of a sudden, you decide you're over people. You decline everything. We can't get you to come out the house for nothing anymore, right? Your stock answer is no to everything. That's something we're going to take a closer look at. Also, it could be the complete opposite. Maybe you've known the person to be honorary their whole life, and now all of a sudden they're so agreeable and nice. Now, we like it when it's better this way, right? But the same could be true, right? Maybe there's something more going on with that person's health and we need to take a closer look at. And that really leads into 10, changes in mood and personality. And I think this is the one where, I would employ you to lean into the person a bit more, especially if you see drastic changes in their mood and personality. Instead of staying away from them, if they seem grumpy or angry, maybe that's the time to lean in. Because sometimes when we are scared and we're afraid and we don't know what's going on with our bodies, you will hear people say who have dementia or Alzheimer's, they will say, I knew something was off, or I felt funny, but I couldn't quite pinpoint what it was. But if the organ that helps you to make sense out of life is the organ that's being impacted, it's going to be hard for you to put your finger on it, right? So instead of us not answering the phone or calling them because we just feel like they're angry and grumpy, then we want to lean in, and love on them a little more. Go see them, because it indeed could be something more going on with them, and it could be health related, all right? So those are all the warning signs. Now, I'm going to hold everyone to it. Don't walk. If Deacon Jackson starts to tell me and you guys are walking up to him on Sunday talking about you got dementia, all right, I will say you can call me. We can talk about it, but I'm going to tell you probably do not, all right? All right. So how is Alzheimer's diagnosed, all right? Alzheimer's is diagnosed, and it's not one simple test that they give you. It's a series of tests, right? So the series of tests could be it's all of these things that are listed. You're going to do a mental status exam. That's when you go to the doctor and they tell you, remember these 3 words: rainbow, tree, I don't know, brown, right? And they're going to do some things and go through the business, and before you walk out the office, they're going to ask you, what were those 3 words? They're going to ask you to draw a clock, or they may ask you to draw a cube or a cylinder of some sort. They're going to ask you a history of illness in your family and with yourself. They're going to do a physical exam, including blood tests. They're going to draw blood, and when they're drawing blood, they're trying to rule out your thyroid, diabetes, cholesterol, and heart disease. That's what they're looking for, right? Vitamin deficiencies is another one. They're going to do a brain scan. They're going to do a CT or MRI, and they're going to be looking to see if you have any type of tumors or any abnormalities or changes in the brain, right? And then they're going to do a memory and language test. They may say, here's the letter F. Write all the words you can think of in 2 minutes that start with the word F, right? And you get to write anything that you can come up with the word that starts with the word F, right? The results of all of those tests are going to come back, and from there, they're going to determine whether or not you have a type of dementia, and then try to drill down into what type of dementia you are dealing with, okay? It takes all of these. Now, I'm going to get on the soapbox for a minute. When it comes to being diagnosed, the doctors that can diagnose you are a neurologist, a geriatrician, a neuropsychologist. Those are the doctors that have the ability to diagnose you for dementia disease. A neuropsychologist, a neurologist, a geriatrician. If you have received a diagnosis from a primary care physician, I'm not saying that it is inaccurate, but I would get a second opinion from someone who specializes in this area. All right. When you turn 50, it is recommended that you have a geriatrician as your primary care physician. A geriatrician is a person who specializes in the care of older adults. They're going to be the doctor that's most in tune with what happens to your body as you get older, as you age. Just like kids have pediatricians, older adults have geriatricians, right? A neurologist is going to be focused on everything that happens with the brain, right? And a neuropsychologist is someone that's also focused on the brain from a physical standpoint as well as a mental health standpoint. If you do not have a geriatrician, I encourage everyone to get a geriatrician. Geriatrician, yes, yes. 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 The reason why you want a geriatrician, though, is because when you go to a geriatrician, there are certain things they're going to automatically test you for every single time you come. It is standard protocol. One of those things is a UTI. They're going to test you for a UTI regardless. If you've ever been around someone with an untreated UTI, it seems like they have dementia, and they do not. It's just an untreated UTI. So you want to be connected to a doctor that's going to be more in tune with your body in this next stage of life, because they may see things a lot quicker, catch them a lot quicker, be able to go ahead and get you on treatment protocols a lot quicker. The other thing that I will stand on the soapbox and say to you is that if you are talking to a doctor and you're not certain, or it's okay to get a second opinion. It's okay to question the doctor. It's okay to question treatment protocols. You have to be the advocate for your health and your health care, period. I tell people all the time, this is, they practice in medicine. You're not practicing on me. I need you to come here with some certainty. So if some things don't sound right, and we all have like a gut feeling at times, if they don't sound right, get a second opinion. That's why we have all these doctors, all these different hospitals. Get a second opinion, right? Because it is your health, it is your life, and you want to make sure that you're getting the best care that you can possibly receive. Yes, ma'am.
Kimberly, that's a great point. It reminds me when my father got a cancer diagnosis, and he was going to the doctor's office all the time by himself, and I went with him one time, and he said, after the appointment, now what did that lady say? He said, I don't understand a word she said.
Exactly.
She's from another country, and he didn't understand her. I said, Dad, you've been talking to her for like 3 years. He said, I never understood what she was saying.
Yes.
I'll just go home and read the paper. So it's also very important to take someone with you.
Yes. And I say that especially to a lot of my older people, because Many of you grew up in a time where you just didn't question a doctor. You didn't question certain authority figures. You just didn't question. If they said it, that's just what it was, and this is what I have to do. It is okay to question. If you feel that something is not right, or you're uncertain, or now all of a sudden, the last time I had these glowing test scores, and now all of a sudden you're saying all these things are wrong with me, it is okay to get a second opinion. It is okay to question. I know I get on doctors' nerves because I will say in a heartbeat, nope, I'm not doing that. That didn't make any sense. If I think about one time I went to a doctor and they told me I was overproducing estrogen, but then the treatment protocol, they wanted to give me estrogen. Well, that doesn't make sense. I have a family history of cancer. I'm not taking that. You got something else you got, but, I'm not doing that. It's okay to say it's your body, it's your life, right? And that's why we have these doctors that exist. Yes, ma'am. Yes. 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 Yes, and they are both excellent points. So in the room, we've been having conversations surrounding just talking to your doctors, taking someone with you, taking notes when you're at the doctor. But they're human beings too. People make mistakes, right? Or people transpose, or maybe someone couldn't read the notes, and so what they typed in wasn't accurate to what the doctor said. So it is important that, if something doesn't feel right, you question, to take someone else to the doctor with you so you have a second set of ears. Also, when it comes to those HIPAA forms, writing someone else's name down, because if something happens to you and your family has to make the doctor appointment or need to call the doctor and ask about medications or your health, if you don't write anyone's name down on the HIPAA forms, by law the doctors cannot talk to anyone outside of you. And if you're not in a position to talk or to ask the questions yourself, then that's information your family might need that they can't have access to. So you want to definitely keep all of these things in mind. It is so very important. And like I said, if you don't have a geriatrician, look into getting one. All right. Now, these are all the medications that exist as it relates to treating Alzheimer's. Now, what I can say, I am not a medical doctor, and I want to put that out there first. Yes, sir, I have a question. What about politicians? Oh, questioning politicians? Well, you're supposed to. Absolutely. When? In what way should we question politicians? In whatever way you see fit when you have a question. That's why they have town hall meetings and different things of that nature, so you can come and you can ask questions of them. So they can share with their platform. And then after you elect them, you should hold them to the things that they said they were going to do. Yep. Yes, ma'am. Okay. Cholesterol. Yep. So the question she's asking, she just want to know, when they draw blood, what are they ruling out? So the diseases that they would want to make sure you don't have is diabetes, a thyroid condition, high cholesterol. All of those are things that they have similar symptoms, and they could look like dementia, but they're not. And there's completely different treatment protocols for that. Also, another one was vitamin deficiencies. As we age, our taste buds change, and we don't eat the way we used to. Also, sometimes we're on medications, and those medications are preventing our bodies from absorbing the nutrients in our food like we once used to. That's why sometimes you'll go to the doctor and he'll say, you need to add more protein to your diet. And they start suggesting you drink Boost and different things for you to add more protein to your diet, right? It's because your body's not absorbing, you're not getting enough protein. And so if there are vitamin deficiencies, sometimes it can look like or mimic what dementia looks like. how your body's responding. Because oftentimes I know when I'm not eating right, I develop brain fog. And it's just like it becomes everything feels mentally 10 times harder. And it's not that I have dementia, it's just the fact that I have not been eating very well, and so nutrition matters. So those are some of the things that they're going to be ruling out. All right, yes, ma'am. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Mm-hmm. 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 It could definitely have an impact on you. I don't know how long she's been going through chemo and radiation therapy, but I mean, it definitely could impact her. The other part of that, I would say, it's possible to have more than one thing happening to you at the same time. So although right now they've been focused on her cancer, it's possible that she could potentially be developing or has developed a form of dementia as well. Or she had it and undiagnosed, and the thing that was diagnosed first was the cancer. It could be lots of different things. Yeah, yeah. I would say it sounds like, I mean, I would definitely be concerned. And it's possible that she could be dealing with a type of dementia that is just not diagnosed at this point. Yeah. Oh, I'm glad you came too. It can be difficult. It can be difficult. I'm going to talk about this, and then I'm going to circle back to that because there is some more I want to say in that space. But there are lots of medications on the market, and I am not a medical doctor, so I don't want to get into the nuances of all the medications and tell you the wrong thing because I'm not here to give you bad information. What I will say about all the medications do not cure Alzheimer's. They do not cure dementia. They help with some of the symptoms. And so you do want your loved one on the medications, right? If you're caring for someone with Alzheimer's, you know the changes that can take place. They deal with sundowning sometimes. They can sometimes have aggressive behavior, just different things. So you want to make sure that they are getting the medications because the medications help lessen some of the symptoms that they're experiencing. And it just helps you to be able to better communicate and also just deal with that person, especially if you're having to do more hands-on care with them, right? So some of the medications that are out on the market, Lequimbi is the latest one, Aricept, Razidine, Exelon, Namenda. All right. Donbazil, I'm going to slaughter this name, Resulting, Cevexerant. All right. Those are the medications. Now, what you will see, and I saw some of you guys taking photos, it says up here, or it says like different, like what medications are given sometimes. So if there's in the earlier stages or mild stages, different medications are given than when a person's in moderate stages as the disease has progressed. Also, you'll see some of the same medication given to someone that has Parkinson's or vascular dementia. It really just depends on what that person has been diagnosed with, all right? Common side effects are all the things up under the sun that you hear, the 100 list of things: headaches, dizziness, insomnia, vomiting, all of those things. They just have to let you know that those are potential side effects, but it doesn't necessarily mean that those are side effects that person's going to experience, right? Now, what can you, oh, I'm so sorry. Yes, ma'am. Yes. I would say it depends on who it is, and it depends on the relationship you have with them. And I think you have to take that into consideration first, the relationship you have with them. Um, you also need to think about who are the key people who need to be a part of that conversation, right? Um, if thinking about myself, I'm just going to use my mother as an example. If I was concerned about this with my mother, I would definitely involve my sister and my brother in having that conversation. I would probably talk to them first and say, hey, are you guys noticing these changes in our mother, right? And then we would come together and probably have a time where we're in person with her, to have that conversation, and just start off simply by saying, hey, Mom, we've noticed these changes in how you are doing things, and we're concerned, right? Now, she's probably one of the most familiar relationships that I have, right? If it was someone that I was a little less familiar with, then I have to consider the relationship and what type of relationship do I have. So let's just say if it was a colleague, then my approach would be like, hey, I'm noticing some changes in your work or how we work together. Is everything okay with you? I would probably approach it, but from that perspective, right? But there's a whole website called theconversationproject.org. And they have a whole guide about how to start having this conversation. The bigger conversation in this area that we need to have is about advanced care planning, period, right? Advanced care planning is us making a plan for what life is going to look like as we get older, as we age, period, right? That's not a conversation we normalize. We need to normalize that conversation. Just like we prepare for someone to be born, we have to prepare to get older and eventually leave this place, right? This is not our earthly home. This is not our heavenly home, right? So we have to leave. So we have to prepare for that. Now, in my family, I forced them to first have the first conversation 7 years ago, at Thanksgiving. That's when everyone is all together. We travel, we go home, and it's the extended family. It's uncles, aunts, cousins, it's everyone. The first time I had this conversation, they looked at me like I was crazy. Like, nobody wants to talk about that, but we're going to talk about it. And my thing is this, and this is what I said to them: you don't have to tell everyone in this room your business, but you need to choose one person, and one person, at least somebody, needs to know where you keep your information if something were to happen to you, especially if you live out of state and there are no other family members around, right? Because if somebody has to fly to come and see about you, then they need to be equipped with everything they need in order to care for you. So what does advanced care planning look like? That is when we know about your insurance information. We know your health conditions. We know the medications you're taking. We know if you have a will or a trust. We know who has your power of attorney, or you have power of attorney. If no one has power of attorney over you, do you realize that if something happens, you're literally a ward of the state? Your family technically cannot make decisions on your behalf. It is imperative that we all have a power of attorney. And these aren't things that we just need because we're older. When you leave home at 18, you need a POA. You're technically adult. Your parents, unless you put their name on something, again, doctors will not talk to you, right? So everyone needs a POA regardless of age. Yes, sir. Yes.
but you have siblings. Now, in the state of Texas, do that power of attorney end with the death of a person?
Yes, it does. Unless it ends, yes, it does end. I'm thinking about my mind switched over being an executor of an estate. The power of attorney ends when that person passes away. But then if you are also the person that's the executor of their estate or trust, then that is the authority you move with after that person passes away. Yeah. It's theconversationproject.org. And it has videos, it has prompts, and the other thing I will say about having this conversation, you're not going to have this conversation the first time all in one sitting. You have this conversation bit by bit over time. The first time my mom and I had the conversation, we were in the car, I was driving, I was actually driving her car. She couldn't find her phone. I said, "You want me to call you?" I called her, it rang because we were in her car, and I saw Kimberly Ice on the screen. I'm like, what does ICE mean? ICE, that's in case of emergency. I said, well, it's nice that you told me you're in case of emergency person. It's nice that you told me that because I screen calls. I don't answer the phone every time someone calls me if it's not a number that's in my phone, right? So if I'm your in case of emergency person, I need to do that a little less because it could be an emergency situation, right? And I didn't missed it because I didn't even know. So not only, we want to have these conversations, but you also want to tell the people, right, that you've designated for different things in your life that they are the chosen one. Also, too, you need to ask them if they're okay with being the chosen one. Because sometimes in that sense, it requires money, it requires time, it requires them to have to stand in a hard place sometimes with other siblings, and they may not want to do that, right? So you want to ask for people's permission, and then you want to let them know, right? Hey, you are my in case of emergency person, and with that, you have these responsibilities, and this is where my information is kept, right? Go ahead.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Great information. My comment is, one of the things that I've found important on this healthcare journey is getting to know your pharmacist. I think that is very critical. I can't tell you how many times mine has saved me from some real problems.
Mm-hmm.
Drug interactions, I think it's important to read that piece of paper that comes with your drugs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Especially if you're taking additional medications.
Mm-hmm.
It matters because how they interact with each other.
Absolutely.
So just wanted you to touch on that a little
Yes.
bit too. Thank you.
Thank you. That's a great comment. So everything she said is so true. Your pharmacist sometimes can be your best friend. Your doctors oftentimes don't talk to each other. And so the last guard that may catch things is the pharmacist, right? Because if you use the same pharmacy or pharmacist to fill your prescriptions, they have a history of everything that you're taking. And so having that consultation with them, talking to them about the medications, or sometimes when they come to the window and say, hey, here's some specific things you need to know about the medication that I'm giving you. You don't want to shrug that moment off, and you definitely want to ask questions back to them. Also, even when it comes to supplements you're taking, because sometimes we don't tell doctors about the supplements we're taking. And we need to tell them about the vitamins and supplements we're taking, even if they're over the counter, because although the vitamins and supplements, they can still sometimes have an adverse interaction with medications that we're taking. So when you're on certain meds, you don't want to just start taking things over the counter without consulting with your doctor or the pharmacist first. And the pharmacist oftentimes is a person that you can get to the quickest, right? He's the person that's going to be right there, and he or she can answer all of your questions about the medications that you're taking. Also, too, it's another good thing you want to ask is, does this medication require that I eat with it? right? Because that's another way sometimes we get ourselves in trouble. We were supposed to eat with the medication, and we just took the meds and we didn't eat prior to taking it. And now our stomachs are all tore up and upset, and we like, I'm not taking that medication, it keeps doing me. And it's not the fact that it's the medication, it's how you're taking the medication, right? Also, if medication, you're taking something and it keeps you up late at night, right? Even though it may not have that on the label as taking it at a certain time, you may still want to inform your doctor or your pharmacist that, hey, this is interrupting my sleep. Can this medication be taken earlier? Does it have to be taken at this time? Or do you need something different altogether, right? Because until you take a medication, you don't know how it's going to interact in your body. And as African Americans, we don't participate in a lot of studies. We don't participate in research. And so many of these medications on the market are not necessarily designed for our bodies, right? That's why it's so important that we start to participate in clinical trials, that we get involved in research. And there are lots of different research studies that are out here about Alzheimer's and different types of dementia that exist. And they had one, and I'm not sure if it's still going on, but it was in Fort Worth. It's UNT, they were doing a brain study. And they were seeking out African Americans to do this research with. And so, you know, you can go out there and see, and matter of fact, I will go out there and see, and I'll email it to Deacon Jackson, so that he can share with all of you all about this brain study. Then we also have another researcher that's in our area. Her office is off. I can see her face. I'm having a moment, y'all. I can't think of her name. Oh, gosh. Maybe it'll come back to me. But she does a lot of research, and she just opened a clinic in the southern sector. It's going to come to me before I leave here, and I will tell you her name. But we want to participate in research, clinical trials, and that's how we get medications and things that line up more with our bodies, more so than what we currently have, okay? All right. Any other questions? Yes, ma'am.
We are afraid of doing this, so there has to be a lot of education in the community that we will be comfortable
Yes,
saying, you know, I want to do this research because of past history
absolutely.
where, you know, we have been abused medically, so it needs a lot of education.
It does.
For us to participate. We're not going to jump. I said, me.
And that's very true. You know, we all, the Tuskegee experiment, and that is why we do not participate in research. And researchers are well aware that they're trying to do a better job of education and coming into our communities and having these conversations and being transparent. One thing that exists now that didn't exist then is the IRB. And anytime that you're doing research, you have to go before a board to get approved, especially if you're using human beings and you're doing case studies and you're doing this research. That was something that did not take place during the Tuskegee experiment. But again, I go back to gut feeling, right? If I don't feel right about something, then you have the right to express that, and you also have the right to withdraw from anything. But we do need to be more involved in research so that we can get medications that are better suited for us.
We also want to know, are you going to be taking the placebo or the medication? Sometimes you're in a trial,
Yeah.
but they won't tell you what you're.
If it's a blind study, they don't know. They literally don't know, because part of it being a blind study is so that they want to make sure that it's not tainted in any way, shape, or form. So they literally, you know, have you're a number. And so based on what number may determine what they give you, but they don't necessarily know what you're going to receive until you receive it. Yep. So you have to be, you know, mindful of that. But when it comes to research and people who are researchers, they don't have a problem with explaining all of this to you, showing you these things, talking to you about it. And again, if you feel uncomfortable, by no means do you participate, right? But we as a people definitely need more to be more involved in clinical trials and research so that we can get things that don't give us adverse effects. Yeah.
I don't want to get ahead of the slide, but one of the questions that came up earlier was about communication. How do you communicate? And I was looking at the slide where it says these are things that are not straight medication, but things that will enhance the whole livability of this type of disease. Is there a way to convince or even communicate to the loved one how important these non-medical types of things can enhance the whole process? Like I said, it says exercise the body, the brain, feed the brain. Some people are not inclined to work out, they're not inclined to take classes, they're not inclined to read or what have you. Is there a way in which you can be proactive to make certain that they understand the importance of this element besides just taking a pill?
I am very direct. I the short answer is no. You can bring a horse to water, but you can't make him drink. It's about overall quality of life. A lot of these things are. The things that are listed up about blood pressure, blood sugar, eating right, feeding your brain, exercising. Those are the things they tell us, just baseline things to do to take care of your overall health. We can say it, we've been saying it, but it comes down to the individual. You have to decide what type of quality of life you would like to have for yourself. And then once you decide that you want to have a better quality of life, then your actions start to line up with that. But we can say it, we've been saying it. A lot of this stuff you guys probably could say back to me unprompted. But we have to then go from that to making the decision to do it, right? And that comes from within. You know, what's going to be that spark from within? And you would hope that, you know, once a person starts to see or starts to have some health challenges, they'll start to think, hey, I need to do some things differently. Sometimes that's enough to scare people. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes people have the attitude, well, I gotta die some kind of way, so here it is. And they keep on doing what they're doing. I mean, it really, you know, that's an individual choice. And it's hard to get someone to decide to do things differently if that's not indeed what they want to do. Yeah.
Okay. I came in interest of myself and others. Okay, now I have young adult children. And then I see others with young adult children. And I have noticed that they will laugh at the parent for lack of understanding. They will laugh instead of noticing what is going on with the parent. Now, I know that you do this. I know that. But how do we get children in here, young adults in here, to help them understand the approach and notice what is really going on? Because you know, if I should, I'm going to need them to help me.
Yeah.
These are the ones that I am with all the time. So how did that happen? Because we're listening, but if it should happen to me, I'm going to need some help.
Yeah.
How can we transfer that knowledge?
Yeah. Well, I was going to talk to Deacon Jackson about this, but there is another presentation that I do called The Talk, and it's geared towards adult children. And it's really about all the things that I'm talking about as far as advanced care planning and having that conversation. That conversation, or the ability to have that conversation, goes twofold, right? You want your adult children to be in a space where they would notice and would be responsible and say, step up and say something, right? But sometimes they're afraid, just like you are afraid to approach having that conversation with them, right? Because just in our community, it's not something we naturally talk about. We don't necessarily talk about death or aging. You know, I can think of being younger, the stock answer, when you say something about getting older, they just say, keep living. Just keep living. You'll see. You'll understand what I'm talking about. Just keep living. And that's the extent of the conversation. What we're now talking about is the details of that conversation. When you tell me keep living, what are we talking about here? are we talking health? Are we talking finances? Are we talking about wills, trust? What are the things we're talking about? Now we're needing to start to talk about the details of things. And also, too, it's kind of, I think, a couple of different things, right? You have adult children who who are busy in their own lives that they're not noticing, right? Because you look at your parent as almost being superhuman, right? You don't think about your parent really being a person. You think about your parent in this way. They're strong, they've done these things. You don't ever really see them in a vulnerable light. It's not until you get older, and I'm gonna say maybe in your 40s or 50s, that you hit a place sometimes that you realize, my mom was just a person too. Man, when she was 26, she had 3 kids. I can't even imagine. And she worked and she did this. It's when that light bulb starts to come on, right? But until that time, you don't even think about your parents in that way. You still very much have that parent-child relationship. And if you were to approach your mother about your finances or anything about money, she would tell you instantly to get out of my business. Who are you to be asking me about my money? What are you trying to say? So a lot of that has to do with kind of the dynamics within the black family, what we feel is appropriate to say and not say, as it is to adult children coming to our parents, right? So we're going to be a little bit more hesitant to say certain things to our parents or bring up that conversation, or we're going to need help bringing up that conversation. When it comes to our parents, sometimes our parents, even though we're older, still look at us as little kids and feel like, oh, they're not going to be able to handle, if I say these things, or if I let them know what's really going on. Or there may be a factor, I don't trust them to be in my business to that degree, right? So I don't want to share, or I don't want to relinquish control, or I'm worried if I relinquish control, what is going to happen. A lot of that comes down to education both ways, right? When you have a power of attorney, a power of attorney is only active until you are incapacitated and you can't make decisions for yourself. Up until that point, the power of attorney is not active. So if I'm your POA, I can't just come in and start rearranging your life without your permission. It only is active is when you can't make these decisions. So we have to educate ourselves about what's real in this space and what's not real in this space. And I think for our parents, that will help them, I think, to feel a little bit more comfortable with some of the decision and the decision-making process. And then also, too, with our children, adult children, just not slowing down enough, right? And being willing to kind of say the thing that they've always been told to not say, right? To not engage in having that conversation. Yes, ma'am. But it may not naturally happen. They may not be thinking along those lines. Because, again, when we see our parents, we don't, most of the time, we see them as being strong, capable. They're still independent. They still do a lot of things. So I may not think to say, hey, Mom, let me go to a doctor's appointment with you. Because, yeah, go ahead. Yeah. 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 Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah.
You know, like that, so that was devastating for me. I'm better now.
Yeah.
How do we get our young people together? They need to help, period.
Okay. So some of that comes down to events like this. I think sometimes when we hear topics like Alzheimer's, advanced care planning, we don't naturally think as young adults that this is something that applies to us. We think it applies to someone older than us, so we dismiss it. But I think as we come into the knowledge of this is really for everyone, we encourage our young people, we invite them to come to things like this. We have it at a time of day where they can come. Most of the people, young adults, they're at work right now. They're not this time of day, so it would have to happen at a time where it would be accessible to them. Then also too, looking on our website at the Senior Source, we do have videos and on YouTube that talk about different topics, advanced care planning, the talk, different things of that magnitude. So that'd be another way you could share that information with them, and then they could log in and receive a lot of what we're talking about today. But I'm always willing to come here and have a presentation and do the talk, and we can have young adults here that are in that space in life, whether they realize it or not, they're on the brink of becoming a caregiver in some way, shape, or form. And I think oftentimes they don't realize it, like most of us, until something happens to that family member or that parent, and then they're thrust into that position. You're welcome. Yes. Yeah. Absolutely. And honestly, once once the seal is broken and you can start to have this conversation, it really takes a level of stress off of you and them, right? And you want to have this conversation before you are in crisis, right? You want to have this conversation to have things laid out when there is nothing going on, if at all possible. Because when we have this conversation in crisis, guess what's happening, right? Emotions are high. A lot of the stuff we're needing, if you need a POA, you don't have it at that point, and depending on what that person's going through, they may or may not be able to sign off on consent. So you want to do a lot of these things when you don't need them, so that they're in place when you do need them, right? And then that gives you time to think through, right? I may trust somebody with my POA financially, but I don't trust them to make medical decisions on my behalf. I may trust someone else medically. So you don't have to have one POA for everything. You could have someone over your finances and have somebody else over your medical decisions, right? So it all comes down to what you choose. Also, they would need to know about if you have long-term care insurance. Are you planning on aging in place in your home? What does that look like for you? If you have to have home modifications to make that possible, are there finances for that? What are the expectations? Are you willing to go live in a long-term care community? You could even go to a long-term care communities now before you need it to say, hey, I like this place. I would like to be here. Also when it comes to funeral arrangements, doing pre-needs, having all of that in order, because that's when families fall apart, right there, right? When we get to arguing about, that's not what my mama would have wanted. My mama would have liked this. And there you go. 30 years later, we still ain't talking, right? Because of a argument about what we thought somebody would have wanted. And it could have all been resolved if we had just taken the time out to plan ahead and not only make the plans, but sit down our children and say, hey, this is what it is. These are the arrangements. There's no need to change anything. If you decide to change it, you pay for it, right? So we all come in here and have the same understanding. And guess what we're hearing? We're hearing it from the horse's mouth themselves. So we can't say that they wouldn't have wanted this because they were the person who told you this, right? And that in itself will take care of 80% of the fighting that happens when somebody passes away. But again, it goes back to us doing this advanced care planning, having these conversations and not feeling like if we have the conversation, we're rushing death upon us or it's taboo in some way. It's not. It's going to happen eventually. We just don't know when. But the more planned or prepared we are, the easier it is for those that have to manage things once we're gone. You have a question?
We as parents sometimes we are afraid to bring kids in because well, I only have one child, but so it was easy for me.
Mm-hmm.
It wasn't easy to begin with,
Mm-hmm.
but it was easy, just one child instead of having
Mm-hmm.
3 kids, right?
Mm-hmm.
So when I had to bring my son into all my aspects of financial stuff and all my planning, insurance and everything, I was saying to myself, gee, I'm a parent, he's not supposed to know all my business,
Mm-hmm.
but once I got into it, it got easier and easier. You just have to start.
Mm-hmm.
Get that fear out your head.
Yes.
They're going to kill you or something,
Yes.
So
Mm-hmm.
you have to start as the parent.
Yeah.
Don't wait for them to approach you, like
Yes.
they think you're going to be there forever.
Yep.
You're not going to be there.
Yep.
So maybe the parent should start.
Yeah. And because you do think, oh, I'm going to be fussing with her for the next 10, 15, 20 years. And you don't know. Sometimes that's the case and sometimes it's not. Most of the time it's unexpected. So absolutely. Absolutely. So what can you do to take care of yourself, take care of your brain? The best way to take care of your brain is to take care of your heart. Everything they tell you to do for a heart healthy diet is the same thing you need to do for your brain. There is a heart and brain connection. If your heart isn't doing what it's supposed to be doing, the brain isn't getting all that it needs. So you want to make sure your blood pressure stays in the good range. And they've changed those blood pressure numbers. So take a look at that. Because now what used to be considered normal blood pressure may be considered high blood pressure. So you want to take a look at the new blood pressure numbers. Also, cholesterol, blood sugar, all of those things are things, the numbers we want to make sure that are very much so regulated and in the right ranges. You want to make sure that you're feeding your brain, that you're getting the right vitamins and nutrients, that you're getting folic acid, vitamins E and C. Also, too, even as we age, there are still vaccines and things that we're supposed to be taking on a regular basis. You can pull that up. It's just simple Google. What vaccines or vitamins should I be taking at this age? And it'll pull up a list of things that we still should be doing, even still getting tetanus shots and just different things, even at this age. Also, you want to exercise your body. It is hot. The afternoons have been pleasant this last few weeks, but if you can't go outside to walk, I understand it's hot. There are some great low-impact exercises and workouts you can pull up for free on YouTube. There's a lady by the name of Leslie Sansone that does Walk Away to Pounds. You can actually break a sweat walking in place. She does 1 mile, 2 mile, 5 mile, and they are impactful. Trust me when I say this. See, you have it here at the church. That's awesome. But you want to move your body. You want to move around. Nobody's expecting it, at this point that you're going to be in the gym with weights and iron, and if you are, that's great. But you want to, at minimum, walking is very healthy for you. So we want to move our bodies. And when we move, guess what happens? All of those feel-good chemicals, the serotonin and the dopamine, it helps our brain. We get those neurotransmitters that we need, right? So we want to do that. Also, too, diets. Any diet that you get on, you want to talk to your physician first. But these are just different ways of eating, like the Mediterranean diet, DASH diet, MIND diet. These are going to be diets that are high in protein and low in carbohydrates. So just not as much mac and cheese. More protein, less rice, and bread. Carbs make everything better. But they hurt us in a whole lot of other ways. All right, so just be mindful of that. And so when it comes to the Caregiver Support Program, we are here for you. We are located at the Senior Source. Our address is 3910 Harry Hines Boulevard here in Dallas, Texas. We help you with a plethora of things. So all of our services are free. You do not have to income qualify to receive services from the Caregiver Support Program and for many of the things that we do at the Senior Source. One of the ways in which we can help you is if you are trying to find someone to install grab bars, get a wheelchair ramp built, we can connect you to those resources in the community. We also do something called a care consultation. The care consultation is when you have that dedicated appointment to talk to a caregiver support specialist about your caregiving journey. Everybody's journey is different. Every person that has dementia, what they need, how they're experiencing it is different, right? So you walk away from that care consultation with a care plan. That care plan lets you know what you need to address first, second, and third, right? I've done care consultations with entire families. Some of the families have been local, some people have been in other coasts. We met on Zoom. I talked to everybody at the same time, so they can then go and have a conversation collectively and make an informed decision, okay? I've sometimes had care consultations with the care recipient or their older adult being right in the midst of the conversation. No one likes to be talked about if you're making decisions about me. I should have a say-so in what's happening, shouldn't I, right? So sometimes those care consultations also involve the person that they're talking about, right? To give them a say in what's happening with their bodies or what they're noticing, or even to have an opportunity to say, this is what I have, this is what I don't have, right? So we've done care consultations with everyone. We have support groups. We have support groups for spouses, adult children, people who primarily speak Spanish, and also LGBTQ community members. We have something also called a home safety visit, where we come out and we will walk through your home and recommend what you need to remove from the home or products you need to get to make the home safer for you to live in. Most older adults injure themselves and lose their life just due to falls in the home or outside of the home. So we come in and we make recommendations on what you need to do. Now, if the person is a hoarder, I cannot do anything about that, right? That is way beyond what I have the capacity to do, and that is not a safety visit. That is a case for adult protective services, and they are equipped to come in and help with a true hoarding situation. So we can connect you to APS, but we cannot come out in that situation. When we're talking about home safety, maybe your loved one has had a couple of falls in a home. Maybe they're dealing with vertigo, right? And so we would come in and recommend them maybe rearranging the kitchen or the bathroom and putting items that they use most frequently in places where they can reach without having to reach too high or too low, because that's what prompts the vertigo spell, okay? So those are the types of things we would come out and do. Now, why do we come out and do it, and why do I recommend it? Because it makes me the bad guy, not you. You have to engage with them on a daily basis as their caregiver. I do not. So if you are the one coming in now, you done took over my house, now you're telling me to get rid of my stuff, you're trying to make me eat this stuff I don't eat, that's not setting you up for success in that relationship, right? But if I come out and I'm looked upon as a neutral third-party expert, just like with the doctor, they're more likely to listen to me, to take the advice from me, and actually maybe remove some of the things that you've been talking about for 6 months. And they've told you no for 6 months straight, and then I come in and be like, okay, we can do it. I'm okay with it. So that's why I would recommend a home safety visit. Also, we come out, we do presentations like this, but we also have many presentations that we do virtually. You can go to our website, sign up for classes. We also provide free incontinence supplies. They're not through my department anymore. They're through our intake department. However, I tell people we don't have enough to where we can cover your needs for 365 days a year. But if you are in a pinch, maybe you've run out, and you need like 2 weeks worth of supplies, that is something that we can indeed assist you with, okay? If you need a longer term solution, then we can talk to you about longer term resources, look into your Medicare, just maybe you're underutilizing your benefits, things of that nature, so we can get some of that going and activated for you, all right? Now, this slide is outdated, so I'm going to brag on ourselves, my department, my team a little bit. And this last year, we served 2,645 people, and 86% of those individuals experienced less caregiver-related stress, right? So thank you. I thank my team. I definitely don't do it by myself. But there are more and more caregivers out there. So I am going to ask you to spread the word that we're here, spread the word that this department exists, because there are many people out here struggling through caregiving when they don't have to, right? And there are lots of caregivers who need respite, they need a break, and they need to find out about resources that can make that possible, okay? So please share what you've heard today and let them know about the Caregiver Support Program, all right? Here's a number. You can reach us at 214-823-5700. Now that email address, that email goes directly to my department. I see those emails as well as every person on my team. So whether I'm in office or out of office, somebody can respond. So you can email us at csp@theseniorsource.org. It covers Dallas and Collin. We do not cover Denton, but I will say say this. If you live outside of Dallas County, if you call us, we will still point you in the direction you need to go into. We don't just say, oh, not Dallas, sorry, call back, or call, we will point you in the right direction. And we get calls from even out-of-state places, people calling. So, also, too, if you have a loved one who lives here, and their adult children live somewhere else, they still can qualify for, so we'll still help that adult child, as long as that parent lives in Dallas County. All right. Here's some of the other services that we offer at the Senior Source. We have the Elder Financial Safety Center. They do a lot around helping people with Medicare benefits, understanding those benefits. We're not tied to any insurance company, so it's truly a neutral third party that can explain the different plans and Part A, Part B, Advantage, all of that to you, and help you to make the best decision for yourself. They also have money management classes to help you manage your finances as you're aging. Things are steadily going up, and so we're trying to help people learn how to make their dollars stretch as much as possible. We have wills clinics. Sometimes older adults realize they need to go back to work. We help them find employment. We do resume writing. We also have technology classes. They helping you use your smartphone and a whole lot of other things, even navigating some of those healthcare portals, because now it's rare that you can get someone on the phone to talk to them about scheduling something as basic as an appointment, right? You have to go through the portal. And so we teach our older adults how to navigate those systems so that they can continue to stay on top of their health. We also have guardianship. Guardianship is just basically court-appointed caregivers. Guardians come into play when your family members sometimes are not agreeing, they're fighting so bad, and nobody's making the decisions that need to be made on your behalf. Or maybe you don't have children or anyone that can help care for you in your older years, but you need someone. So that's when a guardian sometimes is assigned. But this is a court-appointed action through the probate courts, okay? Then we have the long-term care ombudsman program. Ombudsman is just a funny word that means advocate. Ombudsmen basically advocate for those who live inside of long-term care communities. So if you have someone in assisted living, skilled nursing, a rehab facility, they have an ombudsman connected to those facilities. If they feel like they're not getting medications on time, if they feel like they are not being served the food for their diet or what they should have, if they feel like a nurse is being too rough, whatever the case may be, they would file that complaint with the ombudsman. The ombudsman come out and check. The ombudsman goes to those facilities monthly. They are out in the community all the time, and they will investigate and advocate on behalf of your loved one. Also, too, with ombudsman, if you have any questions about long-term care communities, about their ratings, about any infractions they may have had, the quality of the facilities, the ombudsman are the people to talk to for that, right? Then we have senior volunteer programs, because our older adults have lots of wisdom, and we want them to pass that wisdom on in all kinds of ways. So we have volunteer programs. We have volunteer programs, RSVP, foster grandparents, and senior companions are so nice we have it up there twice. So senior companions are individuals who come out, and they are buddies to other older adults, and they provide respite care for free to caregivers. They can be in the home up to 8 hours a day, 5 days a week. They have the ability, if approved or needed, if they have a car, to take people to the doctor's appointments, take them to senior centers, run errands for them, take them to the grocery store. They just cannot perform medical functions on their behalf, okay? Foster grandparents, they are older adults that are served as room grandparents in kindergarten and pre-K classrooms. So they just get to love on the little ones all day and just have a great time and just really pour into those little kids in their formative years. And then RSVP just means Retired Senior Volunteer Program. So we partner with a lot of corporations that are looking for volunteers to come out to different events and to help out. And so if you're interested in that, being a volunteer at various events, then RSVP is a program for you. All right. So those are all of the services that we offer at the Senior Source. Please, please, please reach out to us if you need us, if you have questions, and we will do our best to serve you. And if we can't serve you directly, definitely point you in the right direction. All right. Are there any additional questions? What? I can't believe it. All right. Well, thank you all. Thank you all.
Okay, let's put our hands together one more time for Sister Kimberly Knight. Well, family, I want to come and give us an announcement, especially those of you who attend Daytime Wow. Next week, we will not be having Daytime Wow here at this campus. We will be at the Cedar Hill campus at 11:15 for Wow. And immediately following that Wow experience, we will celebrate our pastor's birthday. And again, that is the day of his actual birthday, and he'll be turning 59. So we're having two celebrations. So our first celebration will take place after the first Wow experience, 11:15, and then we're doing another birthday celebration for him at the 6:30 p.m. hour at the Cedar Hill campus. So as always, y'all, let's just come together. Let's love on our pastor as we normally always do. Is there any questions for me for next week? Any questions I can take? So we're all clear, all right? Any prayer requests before we close out on this afternoon? Prayer requests.
No prayer requests, Reverend Jay, but y'all listen. We'll be here for 30 minutes to answer any questions that you have post the presentation. 30 minutes.
So yeah, 30 minutes after we'll still be here. Any prayer requests before we close out? All right, let's go to God in prayer for you. Yes, ma'am, we'll be in prayer for your mother. Let's go to God in prayer. Lord, we thank you for allowing us to come here today and to hear important information regarding, God, these minds that we have. God, I pray a special blessing over those who are dealing with Alzheimer's. God, I pray for those who are caretakers of those who are dealing with this, God, and I pray that you would give strength where strength is needed. God, I lay before you Sister Brooks and her family, God, as she's caretaking for her mother. And God, I pray that you would continue to give her and Deacon Brooks the strength that they need to be the caretakers that they need to be. And God, minister and continue to accommodate her mother during this time and this period. Lord, there's so many other prayer requests that have gone unstated today. And God, I pray that you would meet us in our private spaces and places. And God, whatever the need is, God, make the provision. Lord, we thank you for this day, God. Now, even as we're about to leave this place, but never your presence, give us traveling grace and arriving mercies. Lord, we love you. We lift you up. In Jesus' name I pray, amen. You are dismissed, family.